In one of my startups, I worked very, very closely with a young lady, and we worked together for several years, day in and day out. And it just one day I come to work and to find out that she unfortunately killed herself. And I was distraught beyond what some people would be hearing that tragic news, because I thought to myself that if I had missed it with this young lady, then I could have potentially missed it with my kids. So being, as you can probably tell, being a very cerebral person, started analyzing what could potentially be done. And is that a medical problem that doesn't have a solution? And very quickly, I realized that the extent of the problem is such that it won't be solved by doctors in white coats. It's going to be solved by technology.
Our guest today is a technology executive, a serial entrepreneur, a professor, and a startup advisor with over 25 years of experience leading innovation across AI, SaaS, product development, and high-growth technology platforms. Throughout his career, he has served as a chief technology officer, chief information officer, chief product officer, and has built multiple companies with successful exits. He specialized in helping companies bring product to market, test demand, find product market fit, and build scalable technology platforms. In addition to his work as an entrepreneur and advisor, he mentors early stage founders and teaches as an adjunct professor of computer science at Chapman University's Fowler School of Engineering. That being said, let's welcome Dr. Sergey Sundukovskiy.
I would love to start with one question. If your life was a movie, what would you name it?
Well, if my life was a movie, I undoubtedly, there's lots of candidates, but I would say Moneyball. Brad Pitt was the guy that played the role that I sort of fancy myself as a character. That would be the movie about my life.
So can you tell me a little bit about that role? We talked about it off camera, but you got to share it with the audience.
Of course. Moneyball is the premise of the movie. Billy Beane, it's the main character of the movie. He is a player turned GM for Boston Athletics, and he has a problem. His key players have been taken away. They go to different clubs, and his payroll is really, really small, comparatively speaking, with all the rivals. He literally, it's almost nothing. He can't put together a team. So he recruits a guy out of another company that went to Yale, and using game analytics, they put together a winning team. And it was the streak that so far hasn't been broken. It's 20 consecutive games. They won in a row with the team that it was really small payroll. I think it was about $34 million compared to $150 million.
So how does that journey relate to your startup experience?
Well, again, I'm looking as a GM of the company or a CEO of the company or any C-suite or co-founder of the company. You're responsible for the success, right? So you could consider baseball season or any season long enough in duration where you basically have to make it a success. And one of the things that Billy Beane says, unless you win the last game of the season, nobody cares, right? So you need to win. This is something else that I say all the time. Business doesn't have a shallow end, right? So it's either head and shoulders above everybody or you drowned. It's same thing. Unless you really win the last game of the season, nobody cares.
And, when I was talking to you before the podcast went green, meaning live, I want to really talk about your journey. This podcast is called My First Overnight Success. But before that success, there is a huge journey behind it. And I love your story from you coming to America. And I just want to highlight one thing, because you talked about C-suites. You're ultimately responsible for company success.
That's right.
You've worn multiple hats too. I want to turn the cameras to you and share with us the moment that you got here and what changed.
What got me excited about the podcast itself is I really resonate with the naming of it. Again, if you look at the actual quote, it's Tom Clancy's quote. It actually takes 10 years to be success overnight. Now, Jeff Bezos used that quote as well in different contexts, or rather similar contexts and just different wording. So it actually does take 10 years of really, really hard work to be success overnight. Now, again, as you said, my entrepreneurial journey started with immigrating. I immigrated from Ukraine to the United States, and that's in itself an entrepreneurial journey. Coming to a country without speaking a word of English and acclimating to culture and really assimilating and just sort of I fancy myself as pretty much an American. And when I look at myself in the mirror, I see an American. Why? Because it's that rugged individualism and just desire to achieve, and desire to be a success, right? So just sort of that's the journey. That's what I was thinking when I was younger. That's what I was thinking success would look like. It's just a lot of hard work. I mean, if you look at some of the famous quotes, coming to America is the roads are not paved with gold, and usually you're the one that's going to be doing the paving. And I wasn't afraid of doing the paving, right? So I think that's ultimately what my journey has been, and not being shy, taking positions and doing what I need to do, even if I was underqualified. So anything that was put in front of me, I was game.
I think you've left a little bit out. Knowing you as long as I have, you also are very, very open to helping others and to sharing your knowledge. And I personally have benefited from your generosity and so many other startups. So where did that come from?
Well, my motto is one that lights his light off my light darkens me none, right? So I think that's ultimately what it is. It's bottom line for people who want success. So there's a genesis of my personal attitude. My first startup that I started, despite my best efforts, it actually did not fail. It actually was a success of sorts. We raised too much money. But we made all kinds of me personally. I made all kinds of mistakes. So by the time I started the company, I already had a Ph.D. So I thought, well, I know everything. I had a Ph.D. in business. So I thought, well, I know everything about running the company, and I was part of different startups before, even though I wasn't part of the founding teams. But I thought I knew everything about running companies, but I really, as soon as I started actually running the company, I realized that there's just so much I don't know. And I wish somebody before I started the journey would set me down and just talk to me for half an hour. Hey, here's the set of things you actually don't do. But by circumstance or happenstance, I basically made every one of the mistakes, every mistake that you could possibly make, I made it. And this usually comes, you make those mistakes because you raise too much money and you start doing stupid things. You start acquiring companies, you continue re-raising money. It's basically not understanding some of the fundamentals of what you need of building the company and what exactly you should be doing. So as soon as I realized that I could, with a little help from me, others could avoid those mistakes. And so I decided early on that I'm going to devote as much time as I possibly can helping others.
So that brings us to something you and I did together about 10 years ago, did a series of talks on how to unfail. And I'll give you credit for that term.
Unfailing is an interesting phenomenon, because when one of the things that would occur when I would talk to first time, and not even the first time entrepreneurs, it was their consistent fear, uncertainty, doubt, and the fear that they're going to fail, right? They're going to make a mistake and they're going to fail. So the realization that, well, really, you don't need to make any mistakes in order for you to fail. You could just sit on your butt and do nothing and you will fail, right? So no action is required. So startup, if you look at the startups, they do start out as failures. And what you do, if you're good enough to unfail every aspect of the startup, then you achieve success.
And is this a formula you were telling me? You said there's a formula for entrepreneurs and startups. And once you understand that, like, you can make it.
So the way I think about startups, majority of the startups are pretty formulaic. So there is a number of things that you actually have to unfail. You don't need to unfail every one of them to be phenomenal success, right? Certain things you just can't, and you could still be acquired, right? You need to unfail enough of the things to be a viable business in order to be attractive for those that are they're gonna acquire you. So if you look at the runaway successes, those are very difficult to manufacture. It's a lightning in a bottle, right? It's the people who got together. It's the time. It's the idea. It's the execution. It's very difficult to manufacture runaway multi-billion-dollar success. That is difficult to do. However, building a solid business, it's not that difficult. It is difficult because it requires commitment and sacrifice and support from the family and friends and all kinds of things. However, it's not as mysterious as some make it to be. So if you do follow a predefined formula that's by now is well known, then you should be able to build a successful business.
So one of those steps, platforms in this formula has to do with the stand-ups, excuse me. And I know that several times when we've talked, you had teams that were dispersed. So I remember you were in San Clemente, I think, and you also had a programmer in Austin, Texas, one in Poland, and one in New Zealand. I think that's right. Where it was. And your stand-up, somebody's got to be in the middle of the night. And you were talking to me when I said, how the hell do you do that, about commitment and so forth. You want to explain a little of that?
Sure. Again, it's culturally, when COVID hit, it wasn't, again, it was difficult for everybody. But for me, it wasn't as difficult because I ran remote teams. So in other words, I already operated in that capacity for a very long time. I would only go into the office to have meetings. I really didn't run, most of the workforce was distributed. Now, the distribution of that workforce was all around, we're pretty much United Nations. Now, how do you make that work? It's culturally different. Idea of life-work balance, definition of done, contradiction of authority, all this matters. So picking the team that's congruent with both your thinking of how the company should be run and try to pair it together, it's definitely a chore. You also need to find the time, because everybody's remote, you need to find the time. It's not so much of the stand-ups, but unimpeded communication.
So on that, you and I had this conversation actually at a TCVN event that you were at the interview. And during your stand-ups, you really forced the contrarian approach, right? Actually assigned it. You want to explain that?
There's a number of different rules, or I wouldn't even call them rules. I would call them guardrails that we find. It's very easy to end up in the echo chamber as it concerns anything, as it concerns politics, as it concerns building startups, as it concerns building teams, or finding the best possible solution for a particular problem. So one of the rules we have is, I say this all the time: if everybody's thinking exactly the same thing, somebody's not thinking. So even though we do have no devil's advocate type approach, you shouldn't make up problems, but we should be thinking and analyzing data from a different point of view. So if everybody's thinking the same thing, somebody has to take a contrarian approach and potentially look at the data in a different way. Looking at the data in a different way could potentially yield, even if it doesn't change anything, it sort of illuminates and potentially could point for some of the unusual tidbits that could be incorporated.
And this is when I was talking to you, you told me a lot of people, they're pigeonholed, but you have wore so many hats. The CIO, the CCO, CMO, CTO, right? And one thing that you said to me, I think it's a highlight of what you just said, is you said to me that you understand your market. You understand the clients that you're serving.
That's right.
And then I think you used the word psychological metrics. Psychographics. Could you shine some light on that with your perspective?
Sure. And again, this is obviously, if there was only a way of building companies and building careers, then all careers and companies would look exactly the same. So there's many different ways to success, obviously. But for me, understanding your customer and really understanding your ICP, ideal customer profile, and that customer profile tends to, and this is what I noticed, from vertical to vertical, that customer profile tends to stay the same at the particular sliver. So if you're serving small to medium business, if you're serving medium businesses or small to medium enterprises or enterprise companies, their needs tend to be across different software or different verticals tend to be closer together than one would think. So you would think that education software or compliance software or e-commerce software would have nothing in common, but as it turns out, it has a lot more in common in terms of selling to those businesses, understanding how those businesses would behave. All kinds of decision processes that go on in those businesses are closer. So it's the difference between very disparate verticals are closer together between companies of exactly the same sliver, as opposed to largest of the large versus smallest of the small. So smallest of the small in e-commerce vertical are very different than largest of the large of exactly the same vertical. So in my opinion, and my humble opinion, horizontalization is the way to go. If you were deciding what to do with your career, even if you're not running the companies, but deciding what to do with your career, it's not necessarily focusing on a particular vertical, which could change, but rather focusing on the customer, focusing on the consumer-centric approach.
And that brings up one of the startup pitfalls, because we all understand we need to know more about our customer, our target market. But unfortunately, too many founders, startups stop at gross demographics. You know, they know the age and the household income and so forth, but they don't drill down enough to know buying preferences. You can know everything about that customer, but miss the buying preference and you're lost. So it's like that story of peeling back the onion. You got to get down about 5 layers until you find out what the core attributes are. Once you understand the core attributes of your customer, now you can tailor your offering. Isn't that what you do?
Yes, that's certainly part of it. And again, it's a broader picture that it gets painted. So it's not just simply how will they use the software or the any of the additional attributes that you could put on the customer, but it's also, are you competing with somebody else, not necessarily in the same space, but are you competing for the wallet share? For instance, do you have direct or indirect competitors that potentially could be influencing the decision? Also, you have plenty of participants, or ideal customer profile consists of other customer profiles that are basically, they're not decision makers, but they influence the decision.
Right. So you hear it all the time. What's your competition? Oh, I don't have any competition. Well, you might not have direct competition, but there's indirect competition, because if people are not using whatever that software or that product is, then there's no market. So if there's a market, what are they doing? What are the workarounds that you're going to try to streamline, offer, a better product? And they don't take into consideration the indirect competition.
I usually say, when people tell me there's nothing like this on the market, or there is no competition, I basically say then there is no product. Yeah. There's no product and you can't sell it. Because again, you either have not done enough of the work, right, or you're not understanding how your product is going to be consumed. By the way, there's a good old adage that all startups are a race for the second. Nobody wants to be the first. First mover advantage is usually a first sucker disadvantage. Yeah. That's usually the company that everybody will learn from because they have failed. So all the companies that we think are really first movers are not. Google didn't invent search, and if you look at, outside of very, very few exceptions like Netflix and few others, there are very, very, very few companies that are actually known, and they're
outliers. And,
they're very, very, very.
Can't count it in.
Oh, I'm going to be the student here because there's a lot of intellectual languages. So to sum it up, Michael, one thing you said that was very powerful was the buying preference. I never thought about that. How would they like to buy? And then from you, Because just so everyone knows, Sergey, you went to UC San Diego for computer science engineer, right?
That's
so
right.
Now I'm learning how you think, because you're thinking in different dimensions, not just the product. When you think about competitors, not just the direct competitors, but the biggest thing that I'm learning from what you said is what other competitors could affect people's buying choice. That is another dimension that I never heard of. And, for everyone that's listening right now, this is something for all of us, including myself, to now take into effect, to think even to that deeper layer of things. And then, Sergey, you mentioned there was a moment that changed you. There was someone that you worked really close to.
So you're referring to a tragic moment in my career. In one of my startups, I worked very, very closely with young lady, and we worked together for several years, day in and day out. And it just one day I come to work and to find out that she unfortunately killed herself. And I was distraught beyond what some people would be hearing that tragic news, because I thought to myself that if I had missed it with this young lady, then I could have potentially missed it with my kids. So being, as you can probably tell, being a very cerebral person, started analyzing what could potentially be done, and is that a medical problem that doesn't have a solution. And very quickly, I realized that the extent of the problem is such that it won't be solved by doctors in white coats. It's going to be solved by technology. I didn't know that at the time. It's been some years. So if you look at the stats, it's pretty unbelievable. Every 11.6 seconds, somebody kills themselves. There's a 1.3 million Americans that attempt suicide every year. And if you projected out all the years up to 85 years old that people would have lived that killed themselves, you would amount every year to 1.7 million years. So basically 1.7 million years are lost every year. And I thought to myself that this is a problem that must be solved. And my wife asked me a question. So what is your goal with this? Are you trying to save everybody? And I told her, in Judaism there's a concept: if you save one life, then you're going to save the entire world. So I told her, all I want to do is basically save one life, and that would be reward enough. Again, at the time, I did not know, but I was proven right. So if you look at in 2025, you would think, if you look at the list of topics or the list of uses for AI, if you were to guess what people are actually doing with AI, and if you were to guess coding or planning their vacation, you would be wrong. In 2025, that actually changed. The number one use of AI in the world is therapy and companionship. So I was proven right. That not that I was looking for that validation, but I knew that is not the problem that medical professionals are gonna be able to resolve. There has to be a technology problem, and there can be a technology solution to it.
And is this something that you're actively developing, or what stage are you at with this right now?
I've been doing academic research. I've been developing applications, writing academic papers in terms of how AI, machine learning, and natural language processing can be used in order to detect suicidal intent, and what can be done. So there is again, didn't know that at the time, but I very much subscribe to a prevailing theory that suicidal ideation and actualization. So somebody's trying to kill themselves. There is a theory of coupling. So basically, it has to be the time, the place, and the manner. So when that is disrupted, then suicidal attempts usually cease. So basically, if you could disrupt it once, then you could almost certainly stop it altogether. So again, I've been focused on trying to detect suicidal intent, and again, there's just lots of surprising findings. Believe it or not, one of the things that I found throughout my studies is that people who try to kill themselves are a lot more concerned about their pets, right? So if you actually have a history of mental illness and you've been known to having suicidal thoughts, and all of a sudden you're looking to place your pet, this is a sign that something is afoot.
That is very interesting. So this is, thank you for sharing this. I have family members that had went through this, and it was a learning experience for me. And, I want to take it back a little bit more too, because I know this is a project that is very personal to you.
Very much so.
Yeah. And thank you for doing that, because you are saving lives, but you're also very humble, because when you and I talked, you said you had 6 exits in your founder's journey. And then Michael says, no, he has 17 exits. So I want to talk a little bit about that.
So one morning, I was ungodly. We were at 6 o'clock in the morning having coffee at Fast Start. And, I must like you to get to the office at 6 in the morning to have coffee with you. But that's an aside. But I asked you, hey, what's going on, Sergey? And you go, good news, we sold to Capital One. And I go, yay. And you said, bad news, we sold to Capital One. So I said, well, what does that mean? And then you told me about earnout and whether you were going to take that or you were going to let the earnout go and do another startup. So many entrepreneurs out there have no clue about exits and earnouts and so forth. Can you share some of that with our audience?
Absolutely. So again, it's a very common occurrence. So there's a number of different ways that startups can go. Usually startups, unless they really lack fundamentals, they do have some kind of exit. And some of those exits, so again, complete failure of a startup, you ran out of money, lights out, you close the door and then you go do something else. That happens more rarely than some would think. So startups typically do have some kind of exit. So one of the more common exits is an acqui-hire. Basically, you get acquired and the company gets acquired for the personnel. So you end up working for a bigger company. Other exits could include, just a strategic company or private equity buys you and you have an exit of that sort. Some companies run forever. They go public. Now, just simply mathematically, going public is improbable. So there's about 150 to 250 companies a year that go public. But there's about 16,000 acquisitions per year in the United States. So just simply mathematically, if the company were to be acquired, then chances are or if the company would have an exit, chances are it would get acquired. And with that acquisition, there is usually a form of earnout. So it's not like somebody's immediately going to hand you a bag of money and you're going to sail, into the sunset. So that does not usually happen. So company is usually, when being sold, it's being sold for IP, its customers, its revenue, but certainly for the founding team, because the founding team is what made the company a success. So you usually have to stay with the bigger company for some years before you have a full earnout and before you could fully realize the exit. You do need to plan for that. And you also need to know yourself. I am not an easy person. Again, when you said humble, I don't think many people would describe me as humble. And I would say, and again, humble, I define humble as, they're not necessarily, I'm out there and just sort of thumping my chest, but believe in oneself. So I sort of, and again, this is not my quote, people could be whatever above what I can do. They can be smarter, they can be prettier, they could have more education than I have, but nobody's going to outwork me. So being humble, it basically says, well, I don't know. Now, I believe that I actually can. I can work through difficulties and I stick with problems to misquote Einstein. I'm not smarter than anybody else, but I just stick with problems for much longer. I stick with those problems and I work through those problems. I think work ethic is number one. So if I were to invest in a startup, is the number one thing I am looking at is work ethic and ability ability to sleep at night, ability to stay in good health, ability to work through problems until the problems are solved.
And flexibility.
Absolutely. Flexibility, again, you need to stick to your convictions, but at the same time, you can't, stubbornness is the best quality of donkeys, not people, right? So I think you can be stubborn, but again, you cannot be stupidly stubborn.
And a word from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
I'd like to introduce our sponsors because without them, this podcast would not exist. First is Cloneforce. Cloneforce builds digital teammates that help people get everyday work done 50 times faster and around the clock. It's like having a digital teammate. So you just need to make one AI agent to help run the entire company. Next is Reed Smith. It's a globally recognized law firm helping founders navigate every stage of growth, from formation to fundraising, to scale and to exit. Finally, we have Sunstone. They support entrepreneurship, education, and inclusive innovation by partnering with universities, nonprofits, accelerators, and public and private initiatives to help opportunities for the next generation of founders. Together, these partners represent the future of entrepreneurship, combining technology, legal expertise, and community-driven opportunity to help founders build, scale, and succeed. Thank you to our sponsors.
I love that you mentioned Einstein, because one of my favorite quotes from him is, I didn't fail 10,000 times to make the light bulb. I tried 10,000 times.
That's right.
And now we're talking about school, because earlier you brought up a very interesting way of looking at things. We're talking about colleges for kids. And you said it's about going in there and completing it. And even yourself, you told me that a lot of these founders, they're drop out of college, didn't go to college. But for you, not only that you went through college, you went to get several degrees after that. So
that's right.
Unpack that mindset behind this.
Well, one is I do believe in doing things fundamentally. So again, I started out as a typical software engineer, and then director of this and VP of that and CTO of this. But I did realize again that science is important. You should have the fundamental, right? So you should have the foundation you can build on top of, and not, again, going through college or not going through college, those are not necessarily how I look at it. I look at it as there's a lot of really, really smart people who are autodidacts, and they basically teach themselves. This is what is important, is setting the goal and achieving it. And to me, when you set the goal, all my degrees had a particular goal. And to me, regardless of whatever it is, and again, it's just working through problems and completing the task. I think this is really, really important. When people say, well, there's no longer a need for people to go to college, again, employers want to know that you could set the goal and you could show up in one place for 4 years and actually complete it, right? So that's what they're not concerned with a particular degree. They're not concerned with the school. They're concerned with that you could set goals and achieve them. So I think that's important. But I also, based on what I wanted to do, I felt that I needed, in order to, one of the things that I must say I never had, well, actually, that's not true. All people have imposter syndromes at various levels, right? So you academically, or if you show up in the new position, it would be unnatural for people not to have an imposter syndrome, but it's what you do with it, right? That really, really matters. My reach is always beyond my grasp. It always is. And I try to, but I'm never afraid, because I believe that I'll just work through problems and I will get it done.
Is that why you got your recent certification?
I got my recent certification in AI. Prior to that, I completed my master's at Harvard. I've done the Ph.D. I've done another master's. And again, all of those had particular purpose to accomplish. But again, in order to speak with authority. So that's yet another thing, is you can, others will think what they think, but internally, in order to be confident, right, you need to have the foundation of what you want to do. And otherwise, it's just you're hubbling yourself, and that's probably not a good thing. Again, because I wanted to know about burnout, and I wanted to study depression and clinical depression. I knew that I am not a medical doctor, right? So I'm not going to be able to know better than somebody who went to a medical school, but I had a firm belief that this is not the problem that gets resolved by doctors, right? And because doctors, the mind that created problems, or rather not created problems, we cannot solve the problems with exactly the same mind that spawned them, right? So we can't. And I believe that there's a better approach, right? So there needs to be some hubris, some sort of believe in yourself that you're going to be able to contribute anything. I think there's people have low belief in their own ability, right? So what can I do? What can be done? And I just sort of don't look at it like that. I look at it, do what you must, and the rest of it will take care of itself.
And for the audience, because I know for everyone, even myself, right? I was talking to Michael and Tony earlier. You know, all of you guys had sold businesses. I actually had a failed business. And I'm here because they say when you surround yourself with 4 millionaires, you're the fifth one. Or in this case, I surround myself with founders that had 7-figure exits, like yourself and everyone here. So I'm the next one. And in this journey, like, you have this bulletproof mindset. You set a goal and you achieve it. But a lot of people, they don't, and for many different reasons. So what's the message you have for all of them, including myself?
Yeah, keep trying. Keep trying, because again, I think it's unbelievable how much, you never know. One of the things that I tell myself, and also there's plenty of historic precedent where when you can see your goal clearly, you're more likely to achieve it, right? So the setting, basically being clear in terms of what you want. I think what I find more fundamentally, people don't know what they want, right? And they don't know, and they also don't know how far are they. I do a little anecdote. I'm a master diver. I do free diving, and one of the things I noticed when I could see my best free dive was in Catalina, because I never dove so deep because I never saw that deep, right? On the clear day, I saw it was pretty deep, but I could see the bottom. So if I could see the bottom, I could dive and I could push myself to reach it. I think getting some clarity is really, really, really important, because if you could see it, then you will reach it. I
have a thing in my purse. I call it the goal card. It's like very clear with my goal, what it is. And to your point, did you guys know 95% of the people in the world, they don't have goals. They're drifting. They're like, let me try to figure this out. But again, I just want to highlight what you just said. I'm going to steal this quote from you. I'm going to make a post about it. Set your goal and then achieve it. It's not hard. You'll figure it out in the process.
Yeah.
And just know that it's not linear.
No.
Like you said, set your goal, achieve it. That's not a straight line. There are no straight lines in the natural world. So everything is very flexible, very much up for interpretation and influence from outside and inside. So you've got to be able to have the grit to make it through that circuitous path. And that grit is got to be a core foundational component, or you're never going to make it.
And you know what's interesting? The non-linear, like, I get it now. I've been in the world, but this is something I really wish I knew in college. Because when I was in college, yes, it was millennial. I get kids that are thinking different today, but it was like, you go to school, you go to a good school, and with your GPA, with the resume, you get a good job, and you feel like that is it in life. That was not the case, and I feel like that's why I went through my depressions, and my family went through a lot too.
But you were following a very, very old and very static process.
100%.
You had no choice at that time. That's how we were all conditioned.
100%. And to your point, both of you guys, because you guys were teaching entrepreneurs, like, what? I guess my question is, like, because there's still a lot of people that think that way. Even if kids, they're raised by their parents tell them to do things a certain way. What message do you have for them?
So if I could jump in, and we'll let you have the last word. For me, I was a college dropout to start my first business. And I always told myself I can go back later. And as I was doing 40, 50 years in business, I always had that thing in the back of my mind. I need that knowledge. So to me, because of the conditioning, the knowledge was formulaic, and it was the university. But I didn't get to the university, so I had to find other ways of getting that knowledge that made me successful. And the weird thing is, I was asked to come back and to be a college professor though I never had a degree. And you don't have to have a degree. You have to have the desire for knowledge. Now, Sergey, you've gone exactly the other way. You were very much in using the institutions to your benefit.
Yes, absolutely. Now, a couple of things to say. Even though I don't, there's nuanced approach here. Nobody does it all by themselves. They never do. So don't be afraid to ask for advice and to take advice. It's unbelievable how much of anything you will get just simply by asking. Right. So answer is no unless you ask. Sometimes answer is no even if you ask. But it's unbelievable how much others are willing to help. So that's one. Number two, I wouldn't be able to do what I do without my wife. She's unbelievable. She's amazing. She always supported me, and she always had, I would say initially, unqualified belief in the fact that I will figure it out. Right. So she didn't know that I will figure it out, but she said, I'm with you. I trust you. You're going to be able to do it. I knew that I can't let myself down, but more importantly, I can't let her down, and I can't let kids down. I have to do it. And so having somebody to believe in you is a huge thing. And my parents always believed in me. They never put any pressure on me. They just said, he'll figure it out, right? He will just figure it out. He always has. That's the kind of kid, just basically being stubborn and just being able to do it. Hey, he's gonna be able to figure it out.
And because we've had two different paths, it's odd to know that word for word, that was me. The same kind of upbringing, the same kind of support. In fact, for 30 years, I was partners with my wife in our franchise business. So that's the commitment. But you can take different divergent paths if you have these core beliefs and the support system in place. That's the story.
And I have to add one thing. This is something that's reoccurring with a lot of our hosts, almost all of our hosts, is when you're running a startup, your wife is in that relationship, your spouse, your wife, because you're really also dating the business. So you guys are all in, and then you guys just bring a smile to my face, because this is what a partnership is. Like I always say, when you're married to someone, that person also becomes your business partner.
That's right.
There's so many different ways. When you're in a business partner with someone, you're also in a marriage.
That's right. It's a long-term relationship. And again, I jokingly called my wife a startup widow, and it was very, very difficult again, because we have 3 kids, and just like anybody who spends time away from the kids, because I had startups in New York and Texas, and I had to travel a lot. Again, without my wife, that's impossible. Without my wife also, and without my kids, it's also meaningless. So I think that's important. Again, no man is an island. It's just it's not the case. Acquisition, and also you need to know, you need to have your why, right? If your why is acquisition of money, then I think that's a pointless life.
That was going to be my question, because you said without my wife, my kids, then it's meaningless. So that's your why, and that drives you. And I can see that drive. So as we wrap this up, are there 2 people, I'm taking Tony's questions. Tony is here with us in spirit. Are there 2 people that you would recommend to be a host? Are there 2 people that you could recommend to be a guest on our podcast?
It's a really tough question. I think one of the I'm gonna give you 3 people.
Okay.
2 people are gonna be difficult to get, because they're some of the things they're doing is just absolutely seminal work that they're gonna be difficult to get. So Malcolm Gladwell, it's somebody who was
Iconic.
very iconic. Now you also have Jim Collins. These are all the seminal books that you will find
from good to great.
From good to great, great by choice, How Mighty Fall.
Yes.
So these are fundamental business books that anybody should really read even if you don't want to do a business, but it's just understanding the business world. And the third person that probably very few people know, his name is Shay Agassi. Shay Agassi was the founder of a company that's called Better Place. And it was the company that out of Israel. And this is the company that actually preceded Tesla. And a lot of the ideas of electric, so his idea is that we're going to make an electric car, but the electric car is going to be, you're not going to charge your electric car. What's going to happen is you're going to drive into the station, and what's going to happen, the arm is going to come from underneath, take the battery, put it down, put another battery in, and you will drive out. So that startup has failed. He was actually a founder of a previous of the company that sold to SAP, and he made a whole bunch of money. His view of the business and how he sort of considered business had a serious impact. I listened to a number of lectures he's done at Stanford. So he is just an amazing guy. So one of the things that I'm going to leave you with is one of the things that I found profoundly insightful about entrepreneurs. Basically, he was asked to define an entrepreneur, and he said, entrepreneur is somebody who will basically walk into the desert with half the water that they need in order to cross the desert, knowing in their mind, no matter what happens, they're going to find the other half of the water that they need somewhere. That's that unqualified and also innate belief that they're going to figure it out. They're going to find that water and they're not going to die in that desert, right? They're going to keep trying and they're going to do it. That's what makes an entrepreneur.
I was like, boom, that is it. And if people like to connect with you, what is the best way for them to find you?
Well, so they can contact me on my personal email or my work email. Same thing, they go to the same spot. My personal email is Sergey@salesmsg.com. One word, salesmessage. Sergey SERGEY@salesmessage.com, or they could do sunduko@gmail.com. We'll go to the same spot.
And I will have those in the show notes for everyone. So for you guys that are listening, if you find value in this podcast and you know someone that's going to benefit for this or who can benefit for this, please go ahead and share it with a friend. Like and subscribe. We so appreciate your support, and we want to invite you into our community. And until then, we'll see you guys in the next episode.